Hello, guys. David Vose here. Oh my goodness, it's a beautiful day. It's not as cold as it was. I guess that's what we're doing is we're having this little Indian summer. So it's been nice and warm last few days, and even in the night and early morning, it's not quite as cold. But everything is wonderful out here in New Mexico and Paradise on Red Mesa. Hope you're having a wonderful day. The picture you see on the screen is in Cohasset, California. It's up above Chico, California, in the northern part of California. That's an old gas station, and that's the building that my uncle bought and had an antique store. He kind of turned it into an old antique store. That was the neatest place that you could ever go. It was the most awesome place. He had junk everywhere. I mean, the whole he's got 150 acres up there in this canyon, and it was just pleasant area to be in. There was usually good weather, and we would go there and visit. Dad and Frank and Mom and Aunt Darlene would stay up late playing pinochle, talking, eating candy and cake, and just visiting. And us kids would go out and play. We had a lot of fun, but that was some of the best of my memories. This is one of the relatives that we knew very well. This is my dad's brother. And that old man there, he was quite a character, old Frankie. And I think out of all the relatives, we knew Frank and Darlene, his wife, my aunt, and my cousins there better than, pretty much any of my other relatives. And I also knew my dad's sisters. He had two sisters and their kids. But that was about the extent. I mean, there was a couple other individuals that we'd visit once in a while in the old days. But Uncle Frank liked old cars, and he'd go around buying 1939 Dodges, and he would buy a lot of these old vehicles, like maybe a Studebaker or something, or an old Model A or something. He used to go around, and he had last I saw, he had hundreds of these old cars out back. It was an exciting place to be, and I felt connected when I would go and visit Uncle Frank and Aunt Darlene. And I think Aunt Darlene was the best person that I ever knew. Aside from my mother and my daughter, I don't know. And my soulmate, Paula, I don't think I've ever met anyone better than Aunt Darlene. What an amazing person she was. So I have some good memories there. And, you know, I loved my dad and my mom growing up. Guys, life is a very perplexing thing at first. And, my entire life I have pondered very astutely since I was a young boy. I do have memories of literally being a very serious young man, always thinking, but I spent a lot of time by myself. Didn't have a lot of people around me. We lived in the woods and stuff when I was little and out in the country, far away from anyone. So I really didn't have a lot of connection. And Dad was off working and busy, and nobody ever really sat down and had a lot of conversations. And over the years, as I get older, I think back on my life and I wonder, what kind of insanity is this world? And yesterday I found out that it's more insane than I thought. You get to thinking about your childhood. Now, some people may not have this problem. Maybe there are parents that talk to their children, love them, and sit them on their knee and say, "I love you, and this is our life, and I want you to feel secure, and I'm going to be right here for you. I always will love you." I had some of that because, I had a really good mother. She loved me very, very much. But, in those days, I don't think the world was, I mean, I don't think the world's ever been whatever it is I'm thinking it was. But it's never really been, because we've been in this classroom and everything's been messed up for a long time. Something's running afoul here. And some of us are more aware of it than others. But I've been aware of it, but like I said, but I was shown something yesterday that just blows my mind. You know, like I said, when I was little, I was Jehovah's Witness, and we had what we called, what I thought was my family. And that family ended up all stabbing me back and throwing me away and say bye-bye, and I haven't seen them in 30 years. More than that. Most of them I haven't seen in since like 40-something years. But I haven't, my mother passed away about 30 years ago, and, and that's about the last I seen of my family. Like, immediate family. But, so I've always known that. But I found out yesterday something profound about my life, my childhood, that I never knew. And I wonder how many of you might have things in their past that they didn't even know about, that maybe if you got to looking into things, it would blow your mind to know what you were never told. And then you start thinking, why didn't people tell me? Why weren't people more loving? Well, we're going to find today is that they're not aware humans. They're not, most of them aren't aware. They're not conscious of the situation. So they may be your parent or your brothers or your sisters or your family or your relatives. Some of them are just literally not conscious like you are. Now, some of the people that might be listening to this might not be too conscious. I get that. But you know who you are. If you've been struggling to find answers, then you're a certain type of person that we're going to talk about today. And you're in control, but we've got to become aware of that. And that's what I hope to do with this video today, is to help you understand who you are and help you to understand what you need to do to become more aware. Now, I'm going to tell you this story, what happened yesterday, but I want to tell you what this picture is. You're looking at some land that used to belong to my great, great, great grandfather. This is Fiddletown, California, and that particular lot was granted by the United States government in 1865 to my grandfather, John Vose, who was married to Ann Dent. And I never heard of him. Not only have I never heard of this man, no one ever spoke of him, nobody ever told me that I have 5 generations back. Well, including me, I guess that would be like 6, 7 generations. Let's see, I've got me, my father, my grandpa, my great-grandpa, my great-great-grandpa, and then I looked into Ann Dent, my great-grandmother, who also had her father here. So that would be like 6 generations back. And no one ever told me that each and every one of my family members, my great-great-grandpa, his kids, his brothers, all these different relatives from 2 sides of my family, not just my great-great-great-grandfather's wife, my great-great-great-grandmother, but also from my grandmother's side, who also lived in Fiddletown. Didn't know that. I didn't know that my grandmother married my grandpa, and my grandpa's brother married her sister. I didn't know that all the Brockmans lived. I was looking on the Google yesterday, and I saw a road named Brockman Lane. And I looked it up on AI, and they said, yeah, the Brockmans lived there for many generations and married the Voses, and they own that area. And I was like, what? All those years I was growing up, my father never told me anything about my grandpa or my great-grandpa or my great-great-grandpa or my great 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 grandmother and my great 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 grandfather Samuel Dent? Like, what? And nobody told me that we own the entire Amador County practically. I mean, the whole area around Fiddletown is all owned and was granted to my great 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 grandfather and my great great grandmother and their uncles and brothers and cousins and everybody, and it all belonged. It's kind of like the Palestinian situation over there. That's the people that lived there for centuries home. You don't root them out and then bring some new ones in. That's their homeland. That's their homestead. And I didn't even know that I belonged somewhere, that I had a homestead, that I had grandpas and grandmas and cousins and nobody told me nothing. And this here's a picture of my grandpa's land, my great 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 grandfather's land. And so I went on a deep dive to see if, perhaps that grant was still active and maybe I would be the heir and I would own it. So I thought for a while I was going to own some land, like maybe thousands of acres, because if each of the family had 160 acres each, some of them had something like 700 acres up there granted to them. And it was still in the books. And I was looking it up and finding it in the books. And I was like, what? This is insane. In fact, what you see on the screen is what I dug up. And I knew exactly where the property was, which is how I got the pictures. I went to Google. And if you can look on your screen there, you'll see that is John Vose, that grant was made out to my great 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 grandfather. And it just blew my mind. So then I thought, well, maybe I'm going to have some land and I can go home, I mean, I was really tripping there for a while. And then I found out that the government had confiscated all of our land, like a generation ago. It's all gone. The government owns it. And some Jew named Kolakowski or something had bought it all up. Now it's in their family trust. And you see, the reason I wanted that land when I started thinking about it, because I didn't even know much about this, is that these grants that were given to people are not taxable. Once you have that, it's your homestead forever. And, any of you can go out there and look up your family name and probably see that your family had 160 acres granted to them as well. But sad to tell you that most of that land, if you weren't there and you didn't know about it, they considered it abandoned, and these rich philanthropists went along and bought it all up, stole it from you. They took our land, like we're like displaced Palestinians. Literally, we have no place to go. You say, well, Dave, you didn't own it. What do you think? You're going to just be given this land? Yeah. Everybody should have a place to live, and I should be able to stay where my great 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 grandfather made his homestead, and his kid after him, and his kid, and all the way down to my dad who lived in that area when I was born. But nobody ever told us that was our home, and I didn't even know. And it blows my living mind to realize that I'd never been told about any of my history. That you see on the screen is the original grant, 160-acre grant that was given to my great 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 grandfather in Fiddletown, California, and I didn't even know he existed. Came over to America in, I think, 1839 and came out here about somewhere in the 1860s. The gold rush era, and they were giving people 160 acres in the mule or whatever, So yesterday, I was watching, I turned my phone on, and I looked at the screen. I think I was on a TikTok, and this person said on this TikTok that if you go to this website, it's a BLM, Bureau of Land Management, and put in your last name or the last name of your great-grandfather or perhaps your great-grandmother. But if you put in their name, try both, it will come up with all of these grants, land grants. Now, this is just one aspect of this. And I thought, land grants? If I had land I don't know who it would be from. My grandpa didn't have any land, I didn't think. I didn't even know who my great grandpa was or my great great grandpa. I had no awareness or no consciousness as to who my people were. And I never even thought about that before. It's like my grandpa died 2 months after I was born. I was born August 21st. My grandpa died in November something of that same year. I was told the story when I was little that when my grandpa was dying in the hospital of throat cancer from smoking, because back in those days they smoked some real cigarettes, right? Some cigarettes that were made out of asbestos and evil, if you think we got some poisons today. In those days, people were given little death sticks and told to suck on them, and they died with a lot of pain. So they held me. I wasn't allowed to go into the cancer ward or whatever in this little small town, but there were windows outside where they held me up in the window, and my grandpa got to see me. Now that gave me comfort growing up because it told me that my grandpa, whoever he was, I never was told about him. I never knew who he was. Nobody had a whole lot of stories other than about him and his dog, because he used to go to the bar and his dog would sit at the front door, and I guess the dog was really smart. And I've got a few stories that I was told about the dog. I was also told some other weird. I heard my uncle and my dad talking once in a while, and I'd hear about somebody named Ralph and somebody named Fred and somebody named Grant and somebody named Leola. I remember one time when I was about 17, 18, my grandma, whom I didn't know very well until the last few months of her life, but I was visiting her and she said, let's go. I've got to go visit my sister in Fiddletown, California. And I'd heard the word Fiddletown in growing up once in a while, but nobody ever told me what this town was. But Grandma and I drove up to Fiddletown, and we were in this little nursing home, and we're visiting her sister, Leola. I remember Grandma telling me on the way up, she's, my sister's mean. Nobody likes her. Nobody likes her, she says. And she's dying in a few days, and she's in an old folks home, and I'm going to go visit her. And so Grandma went in there and held her hand, and she was in this wheelchair, and I was looking at her, and I was thinking, I've never met this woman. Who is this woman? This is my grandma's sister. And you'd think my grandmother would have said or gave me the story, but no, my dad never did. My grandma never did. My aunts, uncles, nobody ever told me that this woman, Leola, was not only my grandma's sister, but she was my grandpa's brother's wife. My grandpa had a brother who married Leola, and my grandpa married Zella, Virginia, my grandma. I had no idea. They must have been very close. They must have spent many years growing up together and were very close and married this two brothers and two sisters. And I thought, wow. And then I started finding out who this Ralph was and Fred. That was my grandpa's brothers. And I'm like, whoa. Nobody ever told me anything. And I just assumed that Grandpa just somehow wandered into California one day when he was a kid and probably from some place back east or something. And, it wasn't important because it was the old days. It was the past. Nobody cared. But I didn't think that several generations lived right there in Fiddletown and all that land belonged to them. They used to own the whole area. They were the patriarchs. My grandfather was the patriarch of all these individuals, and I never knew about them, and I didn't know this is where I belonged. This is my family. In fact, I had no contact with them. Probably because our part of the family became witnesses, Jehovah's Witnesses, and we went off by ourselves, and just our little group hung out together. We didn't go visit that side of the family, Grandpa's side. They never became witnesses. But Grandma's side, they kind of were witnesses, or some of them would go once in a while, or they, most of them weren't Jehovah's Witnesses either, but we were allowed to go visit them, probably because I mean, I do remember going and visiting a couple of uncles that were my grandma's brothers, um, Uncle Forey and Uncle Aubrey, and there was Uncle Bill and the Brockmans. And so I knew a little bit about grandma's family, but that was it. Nobody ever took me to Fiddletown except for grandma one day, and I met Leola, but she was dying and I didn't know even who she was. And nobody ever told me that I had a great, great, great grandfather and a great, great, great grandmother and great, great uncles and aunts and cousins. And now I look it up in the phone book and I'm finding all these names. The Voses are still there. My descendants, I've never even met them. Some of them probably first cousins and stuff. I never even knew who they were. So I was thinking about how insane it was that I, that I had a root. I had somewhere that my ancestors lived, and and I didn't even know why all these people, like my uncle and my aunts and stuff, were always living around this area, down in the area, going down from the foothills into places like where when I was a kid, Auburn, and then they started moving closer to Sacramento, like Roseville and stuff, Folsom or whatever. Well, they were coming down out of the mountains, but my great grandfather and stuff, these people were up at Fiddletown. I remember they would talk about Fiddletown, but I didn't know what they were talking about. And it just blew my mind. And the only reason I got any of this information was because I started looking things up online. And I was asking AI. And this AI is getting really interesting. You can ask AI who your great great grandfather was, and they will tell you if they know. And if they don't know, you have to ask it a different way or give them some information that you may already have figured out on your own. And then they're able to paste it together. And AI completely pieced together my entire history back to my great, 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 great grandfather. Four great grandfathers back. The last one through my grandmother, her dad, and her mother. And all the, it's just insane. It blew my mind. And I thought, well, what kind of a family? I started thinking about growing up. Thinking, why is it that I didn't know my brothers? Rarely ever saw them. Always felt very disconnected with my family. Like nobody ever sat down and talked to Dave. But it didn't seem odd when I was little because I just thought, well, that's my place. We're Jehovah's Witnesses and everybody's busy. But I just thought, well, they all love me. And when I grow up, I'll be able to have a car and, become a elder and talk on the stage and everybody will respect me then and everything. But my place right now as a kid, I just be quiet. The problem is I got to be 13. Dad grew a beard and, we all got disfellowshipped. Mom had a nervous breakdown. Dad and mom got disfellowshipped and got divorced. And I lost contact with any of my family and was for years just walking around in some kind of delirium. And nobody seemed to care. In fact, they probably hated me for it. Like, what about that stupid kid, What's wrong with that kid, right? Look at him. He can't even talk to people. Ha ha, look at him standing over in the corner. Doesn't know what to do with his hands. Like, he doesn't know who he is, where he belongs. What an idiot. And I was like, well, yeah, what is wrong with me? Oh, I know, because I was abused. Nobody loved me. We loved you, Dave. Well, did you? Love is action, right? Nobody ever, when I was a little boy, sat down and, told me who I am, even where I'm from, who I should be, right? Or how to be the person they wanted me to be. Well, they did tell me that, but, it was a religion and you had to sit down and be indoctrinated every day and it was insane. And I thought, well, you look at the world, and I was telling Paula this, we've talked about this quite a bit, but all the major religions, or all the religions, well, just say all of them, all religions in modern times, they give you the illusion, some of them, that they are from ancient source. Say, for instance, in China, you say, oh, well, they're all Hindu, right? Or, Buddhists. They're saying, no, they don't know anything about Buddhism. They don't know anything about their scriptures. They've never read them, just like Christians have never read the Bible. They were taken over a long time ago by a military organization called Confucianism. And I guarantee people are talking about Islam and even Christianity who say, you're going to go to hell, no compassion. But these Confucianary people, whatever you call them, they have destroyed 1 billion people in their minds and their bodies and their souls. They're following nonsense. You're just sitting there bowing. It's like people banging their head up against a wailing wall. It's nonsense. It's insanity. And it's based on evil and death and fighting and warring and hating and honoring. What does that mean? Oh, it's honor, Dave. No, it wasn't honor. That poor woman would sit there and bow down and worship her master, right? She could be beaten. She was part of a harem. She could be raped. Nobody cared. Just respect your elders. Bow. Do what you're told. The whole philosophy of Confucius is confusion. And Islam is not an ancient religion. It was created by the handlers to be terrorists, to be violent, to disrupt the world, to make it chaos. And Christians for years were just warriors, right? Knights running around murdering each other. The best philosophical discussion one might have in the Dark Ages, and it was called the Dark Ages for a reason, was that they would argue about how many angels would fit on the head of a pin. That's the kind of philosophy and intrigue they were involved in. Like, how many people could we send to hell, right? And declare anathema, to this group of people and make a paper bull and condemn this group and try to go over there and control these people's minds and force them to believe the way we believe. And, let's take their land and let's get some tax money out of them and let's send them to war to kill each other. And all of this nonsense is evil, wicked evil. And all of them stood there and just did what they were told. Who were these people? The vast majority of mankind for the last several thousand years, just doing what you're told, murdering and killing one another, raping and pillaging and bludgeoning your brother on the battlefield. And then go home and, kill some animals and slaughter them. Oh, the stench as you're butchering that poor animal and he's squealing and screaming and you're cooking him up and eating it. No one ever told you this is not normal. We're not cannibals. Nobody understood anything about love. And everybody did what they were told. They were soulless, unconscious beings. But there were some people who had some control. But they were controlling us from the lower ego, from hate, from pride. And we had no clue. We were taught a cosmology of the universe that said we're on a little speck of dust spinning 66,000 miles. That's an interesting number. And just flying through a vortex of nothing in a vacuum of nothing, light years into the infinite nothing, there is some big bang that happened. And it's not even because of a divine plan, but it's just a haphazard, coincidental insanity floating around, and there's no point in living at all. It's a dog-eat-dog world. It's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, buddy. And if you want to get yours, you better go get it and take advantage of everything you can take advantage of, because we gotta eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we are to die. That's what they knew. That's all they knew. And then over here in America, they started these religions. They were financing these religions like Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons and Adventists and Moonies and whatever else crazy, Pentecostalism, Come on down. Oh, put your hands up higher. Oh, there you go, brother. Speaking in those tongues. Ooh, let the spirit flow. And there was women dancing there, flipping around the aisles and like doing things that I couldn't even imagine a person could do on a gymnasium floor with a mat. but they were doing it down the aisles about a foot wide, right? This big old 400-pound woman doing somersaults down the aisle, you know, in the name of Jesus, blah, 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 you know, it's just it was ridiculous to see these religions. Quakers running around, we all got to wear black hats and black suits and drive, wagons. Mennonites, we've got to wear these little beanie caps, You've got to cut your beard exactly the way that everyone else is wearing their beard, little thin strip of beard around the bottom of your chin, and no mustache. Yeah, you cut the mustache off. That's the law if you're a Mennonite. You have a beard with no mustache. And all the women have to wear dresses with yellow polka dots, right? And a little white beanie cap. And she's not allowed to be seen in public without that hat. And no radios in your cars. Okay, you know what? Is this righteousness that you must wear a little beard? Oh, and witnesses couldn't wear any beards until my dad was sent in to, like a troubleshooter, to grow a beard and create this, controversy that almost brought Jehovah's Witnesses to their end, this controversy. It took years to settle it. It destroyed my entire family. But what the fiddly diddly's going on with all of this nonsense? Confucius, Islam, Jehovah's Witnesses, insane Christian religions that say when you die, you're dead, that's it. And other religions that say, well, when you do something wrong, the Lord sends you to hell to be tortured in flames of fire forever and ever. This kind of insanity would not possibly come up grassroots. It's a regiment, and it couldn't have been regimented if we were conscious beings. If the world was full of divine souls, none of this could have ever happened. The problem is that there's a few of us that are in a crazy game with some non-players in the background, some characters that are not playing the game, but are soulless individuals. And yes, that's found in the Bible, friends. And I want to share some of that information from the scriptures with you today. So, in the Gnostic teachings, especially the Valentinian school, they categorize humans into three types. There are three types of humans. And if this had not been in Scripture, because I do believe all Scripture is inspired of deity and beneficial for teaching, for setting matters straight, and so having seen this in the Gnostic teachings, it really helps me to understand a little bit better the circumstances that I have seen in my life and that I witness. Human beings that were placed into my life that don't seem to care, don't seem to want to wake up, don't seem to even search for anything like meaning, but basically are like non-players in a video game. They're behind the scenes doing their thing. You can't stop them. They don't want to stop doing their thing. They're doctors, lawyers. It's like they got a program. We must kill you. It's like they're just doing this evil plot. They're characters carrying out the evil plot. Perhaps that's what the Old Testament in the Torah means when it says that there were the chosen people, and then there were the others that were the wood choppers and the water carriers. They went in to exterminate the land of giants, and to free the beautiful promised land from the giants who were sacrificing babies and who were involved in sacrifice. I mean, you know what the evil things in the Bible are? The evil things in the Old Testament and in the New Testament is sacrificing animals, rituals, and idolatry. This is what forever and ever was evil and sinful. Not somebody having sex with somebody, or somebody trying to live, or somebody trying to have a garden, or, or you can't plant that there. That's a sin, or, or you can't own land, young man. But we were born to be free. But who? Who were born to be free? Those who are the children of deity. There are the two children that are of the Father. There's the only begotten, and there is the son of destruction. And Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. So what does this mean? The flesh and the spirit. There are those then that are attuned with the flesh. They're characters in the game. They're only in the material realm. They have no soul. They have no higher consciousness. And therefore they're not going to be aware. In the Gnostic scriptures, it tells us that they have no ears to hear and they have no eyes to see. They are what the Gnostic scriptures call the pneumatics, pneumatic people who have these ears. In other words, they can see. They have the ability to see. Sometimes they were called seers, and they could see the spiritual. The spiritual part is not the material part. They understood motives. They had compassion. They had purpose. They had love. So there are three categories in the scriptures, and they're based on the spiritual nature and the capacity for knowing, for gnosis, for enlightenment. So the first one is the pneumatics, as we said. They are described as spiritual people. They possess a divine spark or spirit, a pneuma. They are considered the highest order of humans, and they're capable of achieving gnosis. They achieve full salvation because they can escape the material world, and they will return to the divine realm, or the pleroma, which is the fullness with the divine beings. The second group is the psychics. And this is interesting because a lot of people today really glorify their attribute of being a psychic. They say, well, I'm a psychic, and they don't realize that they're just admitting that they're not a pneumatic, that they're not an evolved soul, but they're bragging about their abilities because they are newfound abilities. They're not something that they've had for a long time. But they are soul-ish people. They do have a soul. And that word is psyche, a soul. So they're psychics. Doesn't mean they are very spiritual people necessarily, but they do have understanding. They don't have the divine spark. But most of the people in the world, like the middle class of individuals, that are very religious, but they don't have experiential knowledge. They have some knowledge and are aware, but they're not yet ready to comprehend fully. So, according to the Gnostic teachings, psychics can attain a lesser form of salvation, a lesser form, because of being a good person, or, achieving certain goals that they are allowed to achieve, that they are capable of achieving. But they cannot at this time reach the pleroma and escape this material world. They're still bound by it. And the third group is called Hylics. They're material people. These are the non-players in a video game. The character that is you in the video game that you are playing, you can liken that character to your material body in a created, more or less holographic world, or a classroom. But in this case, it's a game. And that character is no different than any of the other characters in the material sense. They're all running around, shooting each other, or hiding, or doing whatever the game says you got to do. But that character that is you is being animated with your controls. You're controlling that. And so therefore it's more you could liken it to being like a pneumatic. It's aware. It's in the game trying to win the game. It's aware that it's got to win the game because it's animated by you, and you're very conscious that this is a game and this is a classroom. You're not lost without consciousness, wandering around doing or following the program. They're soulless. They're following a program. If you're following a program, you're soulless. You have no soul. You have no psyche or mind, pneumatics. So the game is already created. It's programmed. There are parameters. There are barns or buildings you can escape into so you don't get shot. They don't think, the characters that are in this video. They're made of things that you can see. They're characters. They even look maybe as good as your character. You couldn't tell them apart. The only one that can tell them apart from the one that's animated by you is you yourself. You're the only one who can tell that you are real. These other characters can't tell that they're not real because they don't know enough to know and understand that they are not real. They don't have awareness. They're not conscious. They're not being animated with a mind. They don't have purpose other than the purpose of the Creator to be there as stand-ins. They are there to help your soul's progression. And we are here to help them in their soul progression. Because at this stage, they're only just programmed little beings. Now, I believe that everyone probably has a divine spark somewhere in them. But for many, that divine spark is not available. They have not attained any kind of gnosis or any kind of awareness, which is a soul awareness. Many of them don't even believe that there's any need to live forever. They don't even want to. Most of Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe they're going to live forever. They believe that their soul is nothing. It's just air. It's like electricity. Plug it in, you unplug it, and you're gone. And that doesn't seem to bother them at all. And they are repulsed by the idea that we are entities, that we are divine, that we have a purpose. They serve others. That's what they want to do. They're servants. They're water carriers. They are just doing the job of someone else. They're getting their instructions from you as well as you getting instructions from yourself. You're in the game trying to win. You push a button. You are in control of the game when you're fully aware that you're in control of the game. You find that the program was really designed not to hinder you, but to make you better, make you become more aware. So they serve a part in our advancement. But at the same time, they are listening and hearing us, and sometimes a little awareness, like a little glimmer of light will get through. And while it's not enough for them to become self-aware, we are guiding, knowing that this guidance could take thousands of years, but we're aware that all of the animals have a purpose. A rabbit isn't ready to attain salvation yet, but we love the rabbit. Because we're aware, we know that they aren't. And this gives us compassion. And we understand that we're in control, not them. The players in the game that have no consciousness are not aware, and they can't affect anything in the game other than watch you and allow you to become more aware so that they can be more pawns in your effort to have salvation. So they're there to hinder you, only to give you a temptation or a trial. They're demons. They're spirits. They're not souls. And these spirits they're just programmed content that aren't there to necessarily at this time make them aware. But that resistance gives us the ability to overcome and become conscious or have knowledge that we're in control of all this, everything around us. So they're the lowest form or the lowest order of humans, the Hylics. They're focused on the physical, material world. They're incapable of understanding gnosis. So you have to be aware that they're incapable of it. It'd be like having a little rabbit and you pet the rabbit, or a cat or a dog, and you love the dog. You have deep love and understanding where that animal might be in its existence. We don't expect the dog to learn math. We don't sit and teach. I saw a video, I think it was yesterday, where a parrot could sing, and there was two guys in the background playing guitars, and the parrot was on this table, and the parrot really could dance and sing, and it was quite amusing. But the parrot could only parrot or say a line that he had memorized. Nothing the parrot was doing was coming from his own awareness. He wasn't really even aware he was probably even being recorded. And we all know this, but we laugh and we love the little parrot. And we enjoy the parrot, and we use the parrot as not as someone who we can confide in, like another human that has consciousness that might understand our plight. But we understand that this is all the backdrop in this game of life, and it's all controlled, and everything in this world, including all of the animals, depend on us, the player. And I believe that the Bible says there are actually 144,000 individuals that are pneumatics. There are a great multitude of individuals that are psychics, that have a soul, and they will eventually get their white robes. And I think we're coming down to the latter age where all of these souls are becoming aware. These psychics are becoming pneumatics, but they need kind of a final class. And then there are a number of individuals in the universe that have no desire to attain any knowledge. They're simply like robots. So the Hylics are unable to attain salvation. And when they die, they literally are incarnated back into this world, and they will probably not remember a lot of the evil and wicked things that they did. It will be lost. These evil spirits, and therefore evil actions. And thank goodness that part of us we don't remember it in next lives that we may be going through. We won't necessarily be remembering when we were a bear ripping a rabbit in pieces and swallowing it. This is knowledge at a much lower level. The animalistic knowledge is they're attaining material, electrical knowledge. They're getting instinctual knowledge, and they're following after the lower consciousness, which is a temporary consciousness. They're in it, and what they're accomplishing in this lower consciousness that will eventually be gone, they'll forget it, is that they're establishing certain traits and characteristics that will help them in some other lives down the road to be able to become a knower and therefore attain salvation. The word Hylic comes from the Greek word hyli, and these are individuals that are completely focused on this world, on the matter. Matter has a form of consciousness, okay, but it is a very, very temporary, lower type of consciousness that does not continue, right? We put it off, the carnal nature. They're involved in the carnal nature, They are a part of the carnal nature. They don't have any spiritual spark at this time. We can kindle sparks in people, like animals, showing them love. Certain animals will respond to love a little bit. They like love. Everything loves love. Even plants love love. You can love and talk to your plants. So humans that are mean and hateful, that's their nature. They're carnal beings. They're like animals, and they do respond to love, and you can love them and sort of ignite a spark in them, but it may not really begin to burn within them for many lifetimes. So they only have these worldly desires. They don't desire to attain anything. Many of them can get easily deceived and become gluttons or drunks or just live under the bridge and lose their minds. They don't know how to handle this. They have no control over it. And many of them just become background players in the game. So, Hylics are incapable of attaining gnosis. They're incapable of salvation at this point. It actually, for them, it seems like it's foolishness to try and attain anything. They don't have any real conviction that there is a way out or that there is a purpose. And they wouldn't even understand why you're trying to find a way out. They enjoy being slaves and doing what they're told. They're apathetic, maybe even repulsed by spiritual knowledge. You cannot teach these kinds of individuals, but that doesn't mean we should not realize we are teaching them. We are guiding them like our children. So, in the Gnostic texts, there are certain teachings that explain all of this. One of them is called the Tripartite Tractate, where it literally says that there are 3 classes of humans. You have physical, mental, and defines individuals as a mix of mental and physical. We also have the Gospel of Philip, which describes the 3 types, saying, those who are in the flesh are like beasts, those who are in the soul are like men, and those who are in the spirit are like gods. That is very important. And I think we can find parallel verses in the Bible that we all use with the 66 books as well. And this is also something that could be paralleled by some ancient teachings, like, say, in the Bhagavad Gita. But this is the spiritual understanding of the world we live in. In the Gospel of Philip, it also talks about the pneumatic experience of resurrection during life. Because if they do not first receive the resurrection when they are alive, then once they have died, they will receive nothing. You see, in order to attain, we have to attain in a lifetime while we're on the earth. We have to have consciousness in this. We have to awake. We have to play the game and win the game. We run the race that we might attain the prize, Paul says. So they're aware that they're running a race to win, but many are not. And in 1 Corinthians, in our own Bible, the Apostle Paul says that there is a distinction between the natural man, which is the word psyche, and the spiritual man, which is the pneumatic, pneuma. So Paul makes the distinction. The natural person does not accept the things of the spirit of deity. Now, Christians have understood this to mean that you have 2 parts to yourself, and your conscious mind cannot accept the spiritual things. So we have to become spiritual beings. And this is true, but also, if you look at what Paul and the apostles are saying, is that there are a lot of individuals that are not yet capable of understanding, and we should have compassion on them and understand they don't control the world. They're the children. We control the world. And we're told to cast out the devils, and that's one group, cast them out. And the other group is the children. And he said, bring them to me, feed them, clothe them, because the world will only be a good place, a better place, if it is run by the pneumatics, those who are spiritual, those who are love, because those individuals are the meek, and they will inherit the earth. So he says, the natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit, for they are folly to him. But the spiritual person judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. You see, there are individuals, according to Paul, in this world that are spiritual, pneumatic humans. And we decide, we are the judges. We decide, we make the rules. But we are not judged. We are beyond law. No one can condemn us because we have his seed that remains in us. So we cannot sin. But what we do is out of will. You see, we don't live in the mundane or material. Hypocrisy is someone who is unaware. And those were the ones that were condemned by Jesus. Not the ones who just didn't know, but the ones who said they knew, but they were lying. They were deceived. They were beings that believed something, but their beliefs were false. They weren't doing things from the will or the spirit or the mind. They hadn't figured it out, the purpose. They were just following programs, and they were the ones in the game that were destined to be gone, because the individuals that are aware that they're playing the game and trying to win are going to be the ones that's making the world into a good place. And we're going to have to be the ones who have compassion, which is awareness. Compassion is awareness. If you get mad when people do something bad to you, and you get where you're yelling or you let it bother you, and I do this myself, then you're not quite aware that you're in control. You're getting frustrated. But remember, you're in control, soldier. If you have that awareness that you are in control, as soon as you begin to realize it and notice it, you begin to understand that the characters in the background are only operating on your fears. You are controlling them with your fear. So, think about this, guys. Millions of Africans were displaced. They came to America. They didn't even have a last name. Maybe they did. Remember the movie? Kunte Kinte? You know, your name is Toby. You say, my name is Kunte Kinte. But they wouldn't let him have that name. And so they would call him something like Toby. And so you see a lot of African Americans with names like Smith, Brown, something that they gave them that's not their name. The only other people you see with these kinds of names, Smith, Brown, Stein, like a cup, you know, or rock, was Jewish people, because they didn't want you to know who they were. They wanted to change their name, because they usually had names like Belankowski, and they didn't want anybody to know who they were. So they changed their name when they came over here, something like Smith or Mason or Brown or something. So now we don't know. I don't know the number of Africans that were displaced by bringing them over in boats as slaves in chains. But the world doesn't seem to care a whole lot about that. We have talked about reparations and stuff. Well, this was generations. It's kind of hard to repay individuals for their ancestors and the wrong that was done. Or the Native Americans. There must have been 100 million of them that were displaced and murdered. The Huguenots, or the people of France and Spain, there were millions upon millions of them driven out, murdered inquisitions, and all of this. No reparations. But a little group of people, and they used to say before the war that there were 6 million Jews and they were all dying and starving and we had to do something. So they made a little place called Palestine and brought some of them there. Most of them didn't want to go, but some of them did go, and they displaced millions of Palestinians. Now, I looked it up, and the people there at Gaza, they're going to displace or have or will displace 1.9 million people. 1.9 million people will be displaced. And this means not just taken and, evicted from their home, their house, but evicted from their land, their people, their culture. That's a lot, but it's only 1.6 million. Guess what happened here in this country that is something that no one even knows about? You don't even realize it. But there were, get this, 1.6 million individuals that were granted 160 acres and a mule back in 1862. 1.6 million grants. Each of these grants probably had a man and a woman and several kids. In case of my family, they all had like 10 kids. There was lots of them. And they were living on this land. Now, what we're talking then is about 1.6 million people times 4, 5, or 10. So if you times it by 10, which I think is an accurate number, there were probably at least 10 people living on that land, and including the people that came after. 5 generations. So 10 times 1.6 million is something like, 12 million people or something. So those individuals, me included, I'm one of these. I've lost my land, my culture, my homestead, everything. Why? Well, there were loopholes. There were some rich people that would file claims against your claim, saying you didn't do the work you're supposed to do. Because when you got the claim, the grant, you were supposed to spend 5 years improving it. And if you didn't improve it up to the standards that they had, then the government came and seized it. But it wasn't the government. It was rich tycoons. The individuals that stole my land is a Kalakowski or something. And I'm like, okay, I wonder who this individual is, but he got all my land, and I wonder how many other millions and billions of other acres and stuff all across America he got, along with his brother and his cousin and his niece or whatever. These companies that are lawyers and can manipulate the law. In fact, maybe the law was made so it could be manipulated and handed over to a certain people. But it seems like all of that land in Fiddletown is under some kind of a family trust by a Elakowski or something. And I asked AI how they would have acquired it. AI said that wealthy individuals often used loopholes in the Homestead Act to accumulate large tracts of land. For example, they would hire fraudulent dummy claimants to file on their behalf and then buy the land from them. In other words, they would file multiple claims under the names of their friends or whoever would be willing to take a little money, for this, and they would buy that land after they had their 5 years of improving it or something. And they ended up with millions of acres. So I don't know what happened to my family and their land. I know they were there for generations, so they probably did live on the land for at least a long period of time. But what ended up happening is their kids would move downtown to Sacramento, and while they were gone, somebody would file a claim on that property and say they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, and they would just say it was abandoned or whatever, and they would just, maybe they had certain ways they could file a claim saying some land was abandoned and they wanted to buy it for like pennies on the dollar. So it was literally just stolen from us. Not just my land, not just that, but my entire knowledge of who my people were. I don't even know where I'm from. My father and my uncle, they used to talk, and they didn't even know where we were from, but they did read a book about our ancestry and said we were from over there in this area called France and go all the way back to these Huguenots. But that's all they really knew. I've dug up all the information since that point. But it's literally a displacement of people times 100 compared to what these people over there in Gaza are going through. And the whole world's up in arms about these 1.6 million individuals being displaced. And yes, I know it's much more serious than that. This is genocide going on over there. But the people of California were genocided too. They really were. You look at the millions of people, individuals on the street homeless. These are children of those original miners that came over in the 1840s and 50s, 60s and got their 160 acres. But because they didn't know the law or they didn't know what was going on, the rich came in and stole their land. And now California doesn't belong to us anymore. It belongs to the government, and they're burning you out. Yeah. But that's just something that I began to realize yesterday, that all my life I didn't even know I didn't have a home. I didn't know I was supposed to. I was a drifter. I was much of the time I was homeless in my life. I would live in the woods. I never had anything. I never thought I ever would. But I never thought of, well, why don't I have anything? Didn't I have a grandpa that had something? Well, my grandpa had a mining claim. My dad and my grandma and my grandpa and my dad's brother and their two sisters all lived on this. And then when grandpa died, the government came in and took it from my grandmother. And she was homeless. And so my aunt and uncle moved down to the cities like Chico or Sacramento, and she lived with them for a while, and then the other family for a while. But there at the end, Grandma did go up and visit her sister one day when she was in Fiddletown, when she was in the old folks' home, and held her hand. And I mean, the old lady was senile. I don't even think she knew who we were. But I thought, what wretchedness that wasn't my grandmother, but my grandmother's sister could have been, right? Married my grandpa's brother. I didn't even know these people, but they're up there wasting away. Nobody even comes and visits them when they go to the old folks' home. And there are millions of people across the country that had farms that the government come in and took their farm and kicked them off. And this has been going on for years. And the original people that lived in this land that were the natives, they were all murdered and killed. And then the other people that came in the first wave of migration, in the 1840s or whatever out west, they've all been displaced and murdered. And now they're sitting around on a park bench or under a bridge somewhere in a town near you. Just saying, guys. It is a very sad world we live in, but this is the reason. They're soulless people. And we're the ones, if you have a soul, friends, if you believe you're one of the pneumatics, those who are spiritual, who can see and understand the true purpose of man, then it is your responsibility to wake up, for it's high time, and understand you're in control. You're the only one with the mind. We're going to have compassion on these individuals and teach them how to love and forgive them for everything that they've done. Guess what? The past is the past. We've got land here in Candy Kitchen, and there's more to be had. So come on down. You're the next contestant on Let's Do It Right. Because the days are very short, friends. And the Bible predicts a time of great trouble. And only a few will be wise and will stand. I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you guys have a wonderful evening. Lord will bless you, and you know that. He loves you all. His grace and His peace will be with you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.